All right, so let's get into this. I'll try not to talk about this too much, and that is the Chicago Bulls, the team on my hat here.
Yes.
Um,
Hey, bask in it, man. We get to do some Bulls talk finally.
so let's get to the bad news first. So, I'll so basically with the team, and I'll get to their signings. They're going to be atrocious defensively. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm under no illusions. So let's break down what was on the screen here. Um, I'm not really familiar with their draft pick, quite honestly, just with the Bulls in terms of getting rid of their draft picks. The draft, in terms from a Bulls perspective, it had zero interest. I'm just being
Yeah,
honest.
second round pick.
So Alex Caruso, I like. Lonzo Ball, like. Laurie Markkinen's a question mark. I've heard all kinds of things. I've heard, you just read Twitter and different journalists are talking. I heard he's asking for too much, and a lot of teams are out of money. So
Yeah.
he might be out of luck, and it might be good for the Bulls. So we'll have to wait and see there. As you can see, there's some trades there, nothing of no free agents, Daniel Tice. So let's hop into the big signs, right? So DeMar DeRozan receives 3-year deal in a sign and trade. Lonzo Ball, as I mentioned earlier, sign, and then Tony Bradley agrees to a 2-year deal. And right now, the potential starting lineup for this roster is Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Nikolai Vucevic. So to me, it kind of reminds me, and Matt, you'll relate to this. Our listeners may not. We remember when we both went to the University of Mexico. Remember when they were ranked third in the nation, and the tournament was coming up. And I hate to bring up some bad memories, but everybody's picking, they're going to the Final Four. They're going to be so great. They get bounced in the first round. I have a similar feeling of this team, where it looks good potentially, but I'm not sold, and I can see them being barely making a play-in tournament. To be honest,
Wow.
just in terms of how these pieces fit together, I don't know. And I think in this era of the NBA, especially them playing in the East, it's kind of always been this way, at least after Jordan's era, got to play some form of defense. And I just think with this team, I just don't see it. So, and also the East has gotten a lot better. I mean, let's face it here. I mean, we're not in the Eastern Conference where it's like two top teams and the rest of the teams suck. I mean, you got really probably 5 or 6 teams that are, good. And so I think with Chicago, because of that, I can see them just struggling and losing some games that they shouldn't, just because they're going to be in, shootouts and not being able to get stops. So, do I like them being in the conversation? Yes. Do I like their general manager? Making some offseason moves. Do I like the general manager going to DeMar DeRozan's home on the West Coast and talking to him and getting him? Yes, all those things I like. But at the same time, am I super excited about this roster in terms of their playoff chances of getting a higher seed? No, I'm not. Maybe I'm being a party pooper. I don't know. But
Gotcha. I think two things. Number one, I think for you as a Bulls fan, they're interesting to watch now. They're
sure,
they're a
sure.
better watch now with
Yeah,
this team, even if it's a lot of scoring and not a ton of defense. I like Lonzo on defense, but you're right. Outside of that, and maybe Caruso when he
sure.
gets a chance to play, which he's not going to be a starter on this team most likely. Outside of that, yeah, defensively they're lacking. But interesting watch, more fun to watch. I think the other thing that we can take away from the NBA in recent years is that having big contracts is actually a pretty good thing and not the end of the world. Contracts are very movable nowadays, it seems, and the cap is only going to increase in recent years, in upcoming years, that is. So I think the Bulls are moving up. And I think what this is a sign to me, especially with DeRozan heading to the Bulls, is that the Bulls front office is improving their prestige, their status around the league. So, yeah, they're not Eastern title contenders right now. I would be honestly surprised if they break like top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs. But I do think they are definitely riding the ship, and they are making moves to get ready to make that big move down the road. When some of these guys' contracts, like maybe DeMar DeRozan, when his contract is expiring, what will they be able to move him for? Can they make the next leap at that point? Will they be that much of an appealing franchise that they can get the big player at that point and then really ascend maybe by the time the Nets are starting to drop off? That's what I would look for if I were a Bulls fan. I think it's pretty much all positive, even though, if you're looking at it like title or bust, then yeah, I mean, you're not winning the title next year unless something crazy happens. But yeah, I think I'd be very
relevancy.
encouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. Relevancy. Thrilled to be back to being relevant. Even if they're terrible, I mean, they're going to get talked about just because of the roster instead of just fading into obscurity. So that's a positive. But I guess what I'm seeing on Twitter in terms of this renewed, like if this is going to be some kind of team to really do anything, I don't think so. That's where I'm super hesitant. So.
And let me say, and then I'll move on. There was StatMuse on Twitter. Shout out to them, a great handle to follow. They were saying the Bulls. Here's the Bulls' big three. I don't consider Vucevic, DeRozan, and Levine. So no disrespect to any of those players.
I agree.
I don't think that's a big three. And then I saw people in the comments, which, yes, it's dangerous to read the comments, but hey, what about Lonzo Ball? This is a big four. So I think, it shows how much people love the Bulls, that they want to root for this team so badly and see this team be great, which I do too. Let's move on. And we covered your team with the Bulls because they're going to be interesting this year. My team has maybe their 15 minutes of fame right now because I would say they are the unanimous favorites as the team that won the NBA draft. So I just want to talk about that for a minute because, hey, the draft happened since we last recorded.
Right.
So widely accepted that the Rockets and the Magic were the teams that did the best in the draft. Obviously, you have to see how that talent develops. So you can never put too much stock in this, even with what we're hearing about from the Rockets. But I did want to mention Jalen Green. You can go back, listen to our interview with Ricky O'Donnell for thoughts on him and his game, what to look for. He played in the G League. He has some legitimate scoring chops. I still wish the Rockets would have drafted Evan Mobley, but I don't consider this taking an L, drafting Jalen Green at number 2, especially when they trade up and they get Alperen Sengun. Hopefully I pronounced that right. The Turkish League 18-year-old MVP at number 16. I've looked at some of his footage. He does look a little bit raw, but he's got an outside shot. Okay. Looks like a very talented big. It's going to be a project. All 4 of these draft picks for the Rockets are 19 years old now at this point. So very young team. I'm really excited to get this team on League Pass now, even though they're not going to win a lot of games next year. It's going to be fun to watch their development. So I feel really encouraged. Usman Garuba, a power forward, defensive specialist, still pretty raw. You've been able to see him play in the Olympics. He's been on Team Spain. And then Josh Christopher, who I could not tell you very much about, but has some potential as a guard there. They also signed from your Bulls, Daniel Tice, who I think is going to be a serviceable big, and it's only 4 years, $36 million. The 4th year is a team option. I think that's very reasonable to get a big with some experience in the league for these younger bigs. So I feel very positive about the Rockets. They still have moves they can make with John Wall. You'd imagine they'd move him. You'd imagine they'd move Eric Gordon. So I'm very encouraged with what I see here. And that's basically what I want to say. That may be the extent of our Rockets talk, at least on the main show. I may do separate segments about them depending on what they do this year. But I'm excited, man. What do you think about the Rockets, and who's your next team?
I don't have too much to add. I will say, having that youth, I want to just ask you another question because this is your team. Do you feel optimistic about their potential? Obviously, I'm asking you to kind of be a fortune teller here, but, can you see them gelling, this be a nucleus for, 2-3 years down the road, or is this kind of a question mark at this point?
It's volatile, no doubt. I think most people widely accept. I mean, you were there listening to me when we were talking to Ricky. I mean, he
Sure.
said those top 4 or 5 picks were really supposed to be bona fide NBA superstars. Maybe not all of them multi-time all-stars, but close to that level at least. So I'm hopeful Jalen Green can have a big scoring impact on this team,
Yeah.
replace some of the void that James Harden left, obviously. I think Sengun, being so young, being from the Turkish league, the big question mark. I think if 3 years he's the starter for this team, that's going to be amazing for them. That's going to be an amazing land for them. And Garuba is even more raw. So as it goes with the draft, the further you go, the the less likely things are to stick for these players. But I could see him being a rotation player. Trying to think of a good NBA comparison, but basically just a big coming off the bench, defensive specialist, kind of defense rebounding kind of guy. We'll see if he develops any sort of consistent jump shot. That's going to be a huge question mark for him. And then Josh Christopher, I don't know enough about him to pretend to give you a projection, but
Gotcha.
no, it's very volatile, especially considering another big piece of this team right now is Kevin Porter Jr. And we know that he's had some issues with his personal life, and hopefully we get a redemption story from him and he gets that all together. He's been very positive about being in Houston, loves the environment there so far. So I'm hoping that sticks as well, because guy with a lot of talent, but just some things off the court have kept him from, number one, the Cleveland Cavaliers, but also having, I think, the career that he could have.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, as you said, they look to be a good league pass team. So looking
I
forward to
hope
their
so.
development and Jim just kind of turning the page. I mean, it's just been a lot of drama with that team. So just to have a clean slate to start over again, I'm sure that's going to be refreshing.